All right, let's just get right into it. For years, we've all been told the 80/20 rule is the ultimate key to productivity. Well, today we're going to show you why that's pretty much a lie.
So let me ask you something straight up. Have you ever actually tried to apply the 80/20 rule only to end up feeling even more overwhelmed and less focused than before? Is this famous principle actually holding you back?
If that sounds familiar, you are definitely not alone. Our analysis shows that for a whopping 90% of people, the 80/20 rule isn't a productivity tool, it's a trap.
So you're probably wondering, how can you be so sure? Well, here's how. We took 25 peer-reviewed academic studies on high performance and fed all of them into our AI model, Notebook LM. This explainer is the direct synthesis of that data. Okay, so before we completely tear it down, let's just quickly revisit the old myth we're all so familiar with. You know it as the Pareto Principle. And the idea is super simple, right? Roughly 80% of your results come from just 20% of your efforts. It's a simple, kind of elegant ratio. And look, it's a useful idea to start with. But here's the thing. Our analysis found it's just not the reality for people who are consistent high achievers. The real ratio is way, way more extreme. And that brings us to the absolute core finding of our synthesis, what we're calling the 95-5 problem. Across all 25 of those studies, a pattern just kept emerging. It wasn't an 80/20 split. It was a reality that is much more extreme, and frankly, much more paralyzing. The real ratio is 95-5. Just let that sink in for a second. The data shows that 95% of your meaningful results come from a tiny, almost invisible 5% of your efforts. Now, this isn't a principle. It's a problem. And it's why so many of us feel stuck. Finding that tiny 5% feels like searching for a needle in a haystack, which leads to analysis paralysis and eventually just burnout. We end up pouring all our energy into the wrong 95% of tasks. And that gap between the effort we put in and the reward we get back just gets wider and wider. Okay, so that's the bad news. But here's the good news. Identifying the problem is only half the story. The data also pointed to a solution. So let's pivot from the problem to a clear, actionable plan. So here's the mental shift we all need to make. We're moving away from that overwhelming 95-5 problem and toward what our synthesis calls the 60-40 solution. This is an actionable framework for doing truly high-impact work. All right, so let's break down your new framework. This is the 60-40 solution. It's a pretty simple three-step process. First, you have to be absolutely ruthless in identifying your critical 5% of tasks. Second, you dedicate the majority, we're talking 60%, of your focused time and energy only to that 5%. And third, you use the remaining 40% of your time to manage, delegate, or automate everything else. And I really want to make this clear, this is not about working longer hours. It's the exact opposite. It's about applying a completely disproportionate amount of your focus to that tiny little sliver of work that actually produces results. So you see, this isn't just a tip or a trick. This is a fundamental shift in your entire productivity model. So here it is. The single biggest takeaway from our entire synthesis: erase the 80/20 rule from your mind. Stop thinking 80/20. Start acting 60/40 on your vital 5%. That is the new formula. And that brings us to the final question, the one that puts all this into action for you. Forget your long to-do list for a moment. What is the single most important task that falls into your 5% right now? Synthesized and simplified. See you next week.